Hi and welcome to NVC Connect. I'm Adi Mihalcha and my guest today is Godfrey Spencer. Trained with Marshall Rosenberg, Godfrey has specialized in nonviolent communication since 1997 and became a certified trainer, consultant, and mediator in 2001. His clients range from couples to individual professionals, from major international institutions such as the European Commission to large banks, from local corporations to government institutions. We invited Godfrey to find out more about his journey with nonviolent communication and how he sees the current world scenario. Hello, Godfrey. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, so happy to have you here. Godfrey, I knew some things about you, especially from Salil Ganeriwal, my friend and partner here at NVC Connect, who is a huge fan of yours. You also offered to our community a workshop on enemy images, but while researching for this interview, I was fascinated with your work, versatility, and skillfulness. You train and mediate and coach both in English and French, and you were a senior bilingual interpreter at NATO. You committed to contributing to ending the 3-decade-long civil war in Senegal. And you also served as the director on the board of the Center for Nonviolent Communication. So I had questions popping out in my mind, but I chose just a few for our interview today.
Go ahead, I'll be pleased to answer them as best I can.
Okay. With all our guests, we start from the beginning of their journey in nonviolent communication. So my first question is, how did you discover NVC? What were you doing at that time? You discovered it, and what was your first reaction to it?
I discovered NVC through a student at university, and she said to me, Godfrey, you've got to go and have a training with Marshall Rosenberg. He's got a message for you. And I thought very highly of this woman, and I thought, okay, I'll go. So I went to Paris, and indeed, I went to a training of his. And I was very puzzled. I was fascinated and puzzled. So I thought, this hasn't really grabbed me yet. So the next thing I did was to enroll with him on a longer course. Instead of 2 days, it was 4 days, and it was residential. And during this course, I said to Marshall that I had a very bad relationship with my father in some aspects, that his voice could be heard a mile away from the farm where we lived. And he said, okay, well, let's do a role play. So here am I, 6 years old, doing a role play with my father, Marshall. And Marshall began by insulting me and saying, you rotten little bastard, you're no good to anybody. And I just crossed my arms, and Marshall went on a bit, and then he said to me, how do you feel when I speak to you like that? And I said, I don't have any feelings. I'm a man, and what's more, I'm English, and we don't have feelings. He said, oh, that's very interesting. And he then went on to give me empathy. And I think within about 3 to 5 minutes, I was in floods of tears. And I looked around the room where there were 18 participants, and there were tears flowing down cheeks in nearly every face. And so I said to myself, Godfrey, you know what? Maybe you do have feelings. And I've been crying ever since. It's been a very eye-opening experience to know that I had feelings. And now I'm just overwhelmed with feelings, like in this moment. And I'm glad about that. I'm no longer ashamed to cry in front of you, in front of Salil, in front of the audience. I'm happy to show the world who I am. And it's made a big difference to the way I show my vulnerability. I used to think that vulnerability was something to do with weak. And now I see vulnerability as a fortress. It's where I'm strongest because there's nothing more to take. And that's
Yes,
a wonderful feeling. Yeah.
I agree with that. So
So
I
that's,
understand that your relationship with your father was the one you would have liked to apply NVC the most. I'm wondering what was the easiest way to implement after that training, and also the most challenging parts, not only with your father but in other relationships too.
I think that's a really good question, because when I'm training people, I say to them, if you want to practice your newfound NVC, don't do it in your family. Don't do it in your place of work. Go to a supermarket, go to an airport, go to a railway station and practice there. Because the people you'll meet in those places, it's likely you will never meet them again. So you've got nothing to lose. And I love the idea of people practicing this skill of connection with me. And I tell you how I'm connected to me. Connection with you. I see you acting, I hear you speaking, and I ask you, I wonder if you're feeling sad because you have a need for company or whatever it is. And this is so much easier than with your mother, your lover, your neighbor, your colleague. So take risks when the price is fairly low to begin with. Then afterwards, you can start going to places where the relationship is more precious to you, and that you can then start taking the risk of damaging this relationship by using the principles that Marshall teaches in a very, very open way.
Yeah, I agree that the more history you have with a person, the harder it is in the beginning to apply NVC and to be present and use. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What is your
Yeah.
favorite process in NVC?
Sorry?
What is your favorite process in NVC?
Ah, yes. I like the anger paradigm. I think it's very good, where I'm maybe not even aware that I'm angry. Then I sense that I am angry. And I say to myself, Godfrey, what need of yours is not being met for the moment? And then the anger transforms. Once I get to the underlying need in the anger has no justification to exist anymore, because in NVC, you know that you can meet your needs in 1,001 different ways. And
Yes, you do.
so, because it's not being met in this particular way, isn't a big issue. It can be a big issue if I get obsessed with you meeting my need. Then that's a big issue, because our relationship is under a lot of strain then if I see you in your job description as having to meet my need. It's your job to meet my need. And so I get very upset if you don't meet my need. If I can realize that a need is much bigger than one particular strategy, or even several strategies, then somehow I'm free and I can start to fly.
Okay, speaking of needs, what needs did you try to meet with your decision to become a certified trainer? And also, how did your life and routine change when you started the certification process?
When I put in my application to become a certified trainer, I remember quite distinctly saying to myself, Godfrey, this is such an important step that you don't mind if you from now on live in a cardboard box underneath a bridge. This is what you really want to do, and this is where you can contribute most. So the need of mine that is met when I'm using nonviolent communication, whether training or mediating or offering consultations, It is the need to contribute to other people's well-being. And another need in there is the need to transmit, that I've received something and now it's time to give back to the world.
Mhm.
So that's very important to me.
You can do that also not being a certified trainer. So I
Sure.
wonder the choice to become a certified trainer, what led to that decision?
I think that when I became a certified trainer, I did have the impression that I would be a better trainer, a better teacher, a better transmitter if I was certified. Now, I went to a long training session with Marshall in Chicago, and there were about 30 people there. Half of them were certified and half of them were not. And I didn't see any difference. So it's not certification that makes you into a good trainer or not. I think what certification does for you is to bring you into a community where there is a lot of exchange. You either exchange with the whole group through the forum, or you exchange with somebody whose work you like and you think can help you. So I enjoyed that very much, and I'm not at all sad that I asked Marshall to certify me. It was a very good step in the direction of vulnerability, in the direction of more depth, and I'm really happy that I did it. At the same time, I do want to stress that certification does not make you a better communicator, not necessarily. So there's room for everybody there.
Yeah, thank you for the clarity. When did you decide to start sharing NVC, before or after the certification process?
After.
After.
I was still working for NATO at the time I was certified, and I was wondering whether I would take a half-time job with NATO and do nonviolent communication half-time. And then I said to myself, like I told you, this is so important for me that if I am to sleep under a bridge with no money, I'm fine. And I've never had to sleep under a bridge. I think that I've been very well received by the groups that I've worked for. And so work has expanded. Yeah.
How was your personal experience when you started introducing NVC to people who came to your trainings? Did you have any fears or doubts?
Yeah, that's also an interesting question. To begin with, I tried to prepare a lot. Start at 9 o'clock. How long do you go on for? 9:30, 9:45, and have everything worked out for the number of days that I was training. Then I realized that by preparing in advance, I killed the relationship with the learners because I had a program, and the program took precedence over the connection. So then I saw that and I thought, I don't want to do this. So now when I go into mediation or I go into a training, sometimes people say to me, how much preparation would you like to have? And I say, as little as possible. So that anything I hear, I'm hearing fresh. And so any way I answer, I'm answering fresh. And somehow taking that risk is a lovely challenge to pick up. To say, I don't know what they're going to say. I wonder what I'm going to say in response. A little like what is happening between you and me now. I don't know what question you're going to ask, and I don't know what answer I'm going to give.
Yeah, and I appreciate that authenticity that comes with getting out of the way and not preparing something, just going with the flow.
Going with the flow. Mm.
Like everything in life, I guess there are pros and cons of being an NVC trainer. What do you love most about what you're doing, and what are the challenging moments for you in this process?
So what I love most and what I fear most, is that it?
Yes.
Yeah. What I love most is people coming with personal and professional issues, and when we've worked together for 20 minutes, maybe in a role play, maybe in questions and answers, they maybe burst into tears. And so something important has happened for them. And that's very gratifying for me, is to see that I'm serving life in this way. People stop being nice, dead people. They come alive, and crying is one of the ways that we come alive. I think one of the things that I fear the most is somebody saying to me, what is nonviolent communication? I don't really want to go there because I don't believe that it helps anybody to learn my interpretation of what nonviolent communication is. And so what I try to do mostly is to move the person away from this theoretical academic question to accepting a role play. For example, I said, well, I'd love you to experience nonviolent communication. Would you be willing? And most people are willing, but some people are so mistrusting that they feel that I'm using this offer to set them up and to corner them and to make life painful for them, which is not the case, but some people take it that way. So one of my big fears is, what is nonviolent communication?
What is something that comes up more often than the rest when you speak with people who seek your support and guidance?
I think what comes up most is people who come from maybe the same organization, maybe 12, 15 of them. Some of them have been there for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years. And at the end of the training, when we are doing mourning and celebration, they say, I've been with some of these people for 15 years, and I have never, ever known them like I know them now. That is a very, very invaluable moment for me, when people who have been working with each other in the same department, maybe for that length of time, after 2 days of nonviolent communication, they say, wow, I've really learned so much about my colleague. And that's really lovely to experience.
Yeah, I imagine. What's the one thing you wish people would take and apply in their lives right away when they leave your workshop?
I'd like them to do like I don't manage to do. I would love to come out of my workshops and never again give people advice without them asking for it. And I still can't do that. I still give people advice. And then sometimes I'm clever enough to say, oh, I really regret having given you advice. I would much have preferred simply to be in connection with you, to be in relationship with you, because I trust that you have the answers, not me. But it's an old obsession. If there is a problem, solve it. And that's not the way nonviolent communication functions best. It functions well with solving problems if the person I'm talking to asks for a solution, then that's fine. But very often people don't ask for solutions. What they want is to be listened to. And I'm very, very pleased to have had Alan Rolfs across in Europe. He's a very old friend of Marshall's. He knew Marshall in 1963, I think, and was with Marshall a lot ever since. Alan Rolfs is an analyst, and he was very, very sure that nonviolent communication had a message for him, and he allied it with focusing, Eugene Gendlin's baby. And one of the things that Eugene suggests is reformulating or almost repeating units of meaning that you have heard from the other person. And we did a training in Paris about a month ago, And the people who were on the receiving end of the reformulations, repetitions, were so delighted. They really felt listened to. So I'm trying to bring that into my training style as well, is to say what I've understood from what the person said. And people seem to just love it.
Yeah. I know you have workshops both in English and French, and also you are a linguist. And I'm wondering, being a linguist and having worked as a translator, what common spots do you see in languages of the world when it comes to expressing what is truly in the heart? And also, do you see any challenges in that?
That's a good, thought-provoking question. And I think that all languages are able to express what is in a person's heart. And if somebody can show me a language where that does not exist, then that will be a learning moment for me. And everywhere that Marshall went and everywhere that I've been, I've seen people translating what I'm doing and what colleagues are doing from English into Hindi, into other Indian languages. I've seen it being translated into Wolof in Senegal, and it doesn't seem to create a problem at all. And I just love the idea that humankind has this in common, that we can talk from the heart and we can express how we're feeling and what needs of ours are being met or are not being met. So I have great, great trust that if we have the will, we can speak from the heart in whatever language we like.
You mentioned Senegal. I'm wondering how did you decide to contribute to ending the Casamance?
The civil war in Casamance. Well,
Casamance.
I was teaching in Brussels, and in the group was a woman who made her fortune in telephony. She was dealing with mobile phones. She then sold her company for quite a lot of money, and she said, now I will do with my life what I really want to do with my life. And she bought a property on the coast in Casamance, and she started inviting people like me to come and give training to both sides, to North Senegal and Casamance, to rebels and government. And she saw how effective it was in that people started wishing to have dialogues with each other. And that's obviously the major ingredient. If you want to get out of war and into peace, there has to be dialogue. The other day, I was invited to Kiev in Ukraine, and the same thing is true there, that people don't want to quarrel with each other. They would love to live in peace with each other, but that's not the way it is. And often you put what you want ahead of living in harmony. So the same thing is true in Senegal, that people will be obsessed about their right to exercise power. And there's always a country out there willing to help somebody in the country which is at war with itself. And so in the case of Senegal, there are countries arming the government and there are countries arming the rebels. So that means a lot of pain because people use the weapons. Yeah.
What were your hopes at that moment when you decided to go there? And I know that you went there almost twice a year, and I'm wondering what's the situation now. I know that on paper the conflict stopped in 2014, but as we know, the paper versus reality
Yeah.
is not a good picture. So I'm wondering what's the situation now and your involvement.
Yeah, well, I'd like to answer your first question first about what were my hopes. When I started there, the Civil War was into about its 26th or 27th year. That's a long, long Civil War. And I thought, well, once they know nonviolent communication, the Civil War will stop. And although you say quite rightly that 2014 was a turning point, I still think that there are flames near the gunpowder. And so it's still very hot. And I haven't been there for a while now. I went there last year, no, the year before. And I also met a group of rebels in Caux, C-A-U-X, this big hotel that was converted into a negotiation center for, what was it called? Moral rearmament. It was some rich Swiss families who wanted France and Germany to talk to each other. So they set this thing up. And now it's still operating under the name of Initiatives for Change. And last July, I saw a group of rebels, and they had been at each other's throats. And to see them shaking hands was an amazing experience. So there I was working with Senegalese in Switzerland. But I think there is still hope. And I like to think there is still hope.
Yes, yes, I hope so. I'm wondering how can people expand the NVC bubble, let's say, in a systematic way? Because in my opinion, the conflict or a regime, for example, I'm from Romania, and Romania was more than 4 decades under communist regime, and in my opinion, both conflict and regime are more in people's belief systems and behavior rather than just existing by its own.
Yeah.
So as a human being, an individual or a small group, how that no NVC, how can we expand this bubble in a systematic way so we can touch more and more people?
I don't know if we can do it systematically. I'm not quite sure about that. I believe that any time I have an objective, I'm into violence.
Okay.
So to me, NVC thinking and NVC behavior, needs-based communication, will expand through example. That I will see you talking to mother, husband, child, neighbor, whatever it is, and I will say, oh, that's interesting. And this is something that happened to me in NATO. People said to me, Godfrey, you've changed. What are you doing? Why have you changed? So if your neighbor says to you, you're different, you've changed. To me, that is one step towards expanding needs-based communication.
So you encourage people to lead by example.
Absolutely. I think it's the only thing. If I preach NVC and I tell you what to do, I don't think you'll do it. And I don't think you'll be even able to do it. And certainly you won't do it from this willingness of the heart that says, I really want to do this. It would be as if you're applying a learned lesson or something. And I think that your neighbor, mother, child, husband won't really like that sort of feel, that tension that is in there saying, this is good for you. I know better than you. This is good for you.
Yes. You mentioned earlier about 2 groups of rebels that at the end were shaking hands.
Right.
In your opinion, what tools are most helpful in mediating conflicts?
To me, I've done a lot of mediating, both in Europe and in Senegal. And the most useful thing is for people to speak and to hear needs. And needs are not what I want. Needs underlie what I want. They're deeper down. And needs can be met in 1,001 different ways in English, in 36,000 ways in French. I don't know how many ways in Wolof, but in plenty of ways. And so to me, when people can really get in touch with deep-seated needs, they start to open. They start to open and say, well, it isn't just this strategy which can meet the need, which would be my dream. Other strategies can also meet the same need. And to me, that's the beginning of peace in any region in the world.
Yeah, people talk about having world peace. What is your vision of world peace?
Not quite at the moment. I would love to see world peace, and I'm thinking of the northeastern corner of Ukraine. And it's much more complex than simply Putin influencing his authorities, his troops to come in and take that part of Ukraine. A lot of Ukrainians in that part of Ukraine want to be with Russia. They think Russia. They love Russia. They don't love Ukraine so much. So Russia gets all the blame, and the media in Ukraine says that Russia is brainwashing the Ukrainians in that part of the world. And I think that the Ukrainians in that part of the world are choosing to be allies with Russia. So I don't know when it will stop. I'm just surprised by the number of wars that exist in the world. And my hope is that little by little, a consciousness of the cost of war will become more prevalent than the wish to win the war. Because even if you win the war, the costs are so tremendous afterwards. There's so much hatred in people's hearts after the war. So if we can get somewhere where wisdom prevails and we say, okay, we have this disagreement, what shall we do together? Rather than, okay, you don't like the way I'm doing things, I'm gonna hit you. There was that horrific story told by a man who wrote a book called The Tyranny of Words, Stuart Chase. And he said when the Americans dropped their first atom bomb on Hiroshima, they sent an ultimatum saying to the Japanese government, if you don't surrender unconditionally, we're going to drop another bomb on your country. The Japanese responded a complicated piece, and the translator translated it into English. And the upshot was that it was interpreted as not being unconditional surrender. So they dropped a bomb on Nagasaki. 300,000 more people died. And I don't see any solution to misunderstandings. My impression is that every time somebody opens his or her mouth, somebody else misunderstands. So I would love to think that we will find a way of checking the information with each other so that we don't drop a bomb.
Yeah, and being aware that we have choice also, and
Yes.
role.
Yes, one of the things I really am sad to hear is when people say, I hit him, and it was more than I could do not to hit him. So some part of me just took over and hit him. And I don't believe that. I believe that somewhere between the stimulus, whatever this person did that I don't like, and my hand punching him, I can breathe. And if I can breathe, I can think. But what often happens, I think, is when we are stimulated, we don't breathe. And when we don't breathe, we don't think. So if we could have a good deep breath or two and then have a good think, we would find other ways of behaving with people which would not involve hitting them, punishing them.
Yeah. I'm mesmerized by this vision of having choice, of being present, and
So important. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. We are approaching the end of the interview, Godfrey. I would stay with you hours and hours to talk about what's happening in the world. I'm wondering, what would you tell your 20-year-old self if you could say this is something you wanna keep in mind?
Hmm. I think what I want to say to that person is every human being is always doing only one thing. Every human being is doing his or her best. And the second thing I would like to say to you is you are very, very similar to every other human being. So just remember that human beings operate out of the same set of needs. So any need they have, you have. Any need you have, they have. So you can talk to them. Before I knew Marshall Rosenberg, I often used to say, the more I see human beings, the more I love my dog. And I don't say that anymore because I think human beings are really fascinating, especially now that I think of them as doing their best, and now that I think of them as being just like me.
Yeah. And staying on the same note with advices, what is the best advice you've ever received?
What's the best advice I've ever received? I think the best advice I've ever received is, Godfrey, don't teach lessons. Don't give people advice. And I love the way Marshall said that. He said, don't comfort anybody, don't advise anybody unless you are in possession of a request in the form of a registered letter, which is sent to you. Then you can give advice because you're sure that it's asked for. Otherwise, don't.
Yeah, there's a clear request, so they for sure
Yeah,
are open to receive what
right.
you're.
Yeah.
Mhm. What are you doing at the moment, Godfrey? Any plans in progress?
Yes, there are plans in progress that next week I go from the south east of France to the north of France, a little town called Rouen, very pretty little town. And there I'm going to spend 10 days with my partner beginning a book called, and Marshall gave me the title, How to Make Your Life Miserable. So
I,
that's going to be great fun.
I'm looking forward to that book.
I hope you'll translate it into
Romanian.
Romanian.
Yes, of course, I would do that. Where can people find you for sure and have updates about your activity?
They can find me on my website, which is called www.thepositivecommunicationbusiness, all in one word, .com. And they can find me on Facebook. They can find me where else? They can find me at my email address, which is godfrey.spencer@gmail.com.
Mhm.
And the updates to my website are very slow. They happen about once a year. My website is not like a blog. And maybe it would be a good idea if I had a blog, but that'll be tomorrow, not today.
Yes, and the last question, what is the vision you hold for the world and the role that NVC could play in it?
Oh, wow. Oof. I'm going to burst into tears. To me, my vision for the world is a world where people will understand that power over is so dangerous and so harmful. And I think that NVC can help us to get there by showing people that needs can be met in so many different ways that I don't have to have my strategy implemented in order for my need to be met. My need can be met in loads and loads of different ways. And if I can let go of my favorite strategy, then there will be much less likelihood that I will be in competition with somebody else. And power over is very tempting. Then the world will be like I want the world to be. And of course that wouldn't happen, but that's the temptation.
Very touching, Godfrey. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It was such a delight to have a talk with you.
Thank you.
I learned a lot of things, and I think our audience will also have a lot to learn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this interview, give us a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Check the description of this video for links and details, and see you next time.